So welcome, panelists. I'm going to introduce you in a second, but just wanted to say I'm super excited to have you here. I'm really excited about our discussion today. I think for those that are not familiar with the series, this discussion series runs in tandem with the Hospitality Net World Panel for Revenue Optimization. And so we follow along with the different opinions. If you haven't checked that out, definitely look it up. It was a really good article this time. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about it is because there were so many different interpretations of the question. So there were a lot of different types of feedback and a lot of different types of answers really from different experts. So what we've done is we've aligned our panelists a little bit with some of the opinions that they were most interested in. So let me introduce them and let's get right into it right away. So first panelist I want to introduce, just going clockwise as far as I see everybody, is Pablo Torres. And Pablo, tell us a little bit about yourself and what TSA is and what you guys do.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Pablo. I'm Spanish-based in London. I work with TSA. We do consulting and training for hotels globally, companies based in Singapore. And we help hotels drive performance mainly through upselling and cross-selling in all departments.
Excellent. Thank you, Pablo. And then just kind of continue going around, Clare Hempel with Whittleberry Park. You have a very big role there, so I think we'll get into that in a little bit. But tell us a little about yourself and Whittleberry Park, and then tell us a little about what you do there.
Unmute.
There you go. That's you owe $1.
So yeah, I work at Whittleberry Park, a really fabulous resort in the middle of England, just outside next door to Silverstone Racetrack. I'm sure everybody's heard of that. Been in the industry coming up 25 years, 11 years in revenue management. I look after everything revenue at Whittleberry Park. So promotions, packages, pricing, everything. And I also look after the systems. So everything from the POS, PMS, and any new and interesting products that we see out there.
Thanks, Claire. And of course, last but not least, Julian Barre. Julian is also an associate of mine from the HSMAI Revenue Optimization Board. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Julian, and yourself.
Thank you for having me today. So I'm Director of Revenue and Reservation. I'm based in Paris at the beautiful Hotel de Crillon, part of the Rosewood Hotel Group. I'm also overlooking the region of Europe. So we have a property in London, one obviously in Paris, and another beautiful resort in Tuscany. And we're also working on the next opening. So the next one will be Madrid in October 2021. And just after, in June 2022, we are opening Vienna in Austria, and lots of other properties in the pipeline in the year to come. So lots of dynamism within the region.
Cool. You're one of those fortunate ones that had hotels under construction before COVID. Right? From an academic perspective, you are a really, really fun case study for us to look at. So I look forward to talking some more. So as I mentioned, we align with topics from the panel. And so the first opinion that we wanted to talk a little about was from Max Starkoff. Many of us know Max Starkoff, great thought leader and friend in the industry. And Clare Hempel, you actually were the person who was kind of drawn to this opinion. So tell us a little bit about what caught your eye and why.
Sure. So I saw this opinion. First of all, my first thought was, is this guy gone crazy? How can we possibly reduce staffing levels by 50% based on just 2 years ago? It didn't make much sense to me because we work in hospitality and everybody knows hospitality. We provide service. We're friendly. That's what it's all about. So I dug a little deeper and I thought about what we did pre-COVID, what we do now, and what we've implemented, and the systems and things. And actually, I got us down. So I work at a resort, an independent hotel, and we base ourselves on individuality matters, which is a lot around staff and service levels. But I actually looked at how we can automate things and what we can do, and actually probably reduce the headcount by about 20%. However, I would say that the caveat to that is that we have the systems and the tech in place. And around that is then having the investment and the ability to invest in that tech.
Cool. So let me just kind of as a follow-up, Julian, let me ask you, you're responsible for hotels. So I'm sure that there was some constriction of staffing at some point. It's only the responsible thing to do. But what's the outlook for staffing, even with new hotels? What's the outlook on that? Is it conservative, or is it knowing that things are happening? I mean, where's everybody at right now on the operator side?
It's not an easy one, because in some region we are looking, on having, in the same city or within the same region, 1, 2, or 3 properties. So we are already thinking, forward on clustering and having a different organization to try to be more efficient. Not only because of cost, but just to try to be more efficient, more productive, and to think out of the box compared to what we've been thinking and what we've been seeing, until today. Not only because COVID, just because people are changing, expectation towards work are changing as well. And that's where we need to take a step forward, because we're talking about automation, tools, different systems, but the human is in the middle of all those, subjects. And that's also a key subject which has changed over the last years and months, especially the new generation. They have a different approach to work. They're not ready to do like 12, 16 hours a day like before. They're looking for work-life balance. And that's why, we have to think differently to attract new talent, but at the same time to have something, well organized.
I agree. I think it's interesting. You mentioned, rebuilding with the different structure. I liken COVID a little bit sometimes to someone's house burning down in a way. It's a terrible tragedy, but eventually that memory is going to kind of get a little bit more dull. And then you have a responsibility. Now you're holding an insurance check. You have the wisdom of living in the old house, and now you wouldn't rebuild exactly the same house. For me, the kids are gone, 1 less bedroom, a little bit more closet space. We need more closet space. I'd probably get a man cave, depending upon how nice the insurance company was. So it only makes sense. I think it's the responsible thing when you rebuild to do it mindfully of today and reflecting today's employee values. I mean, if you want to kill a group of young managers, say the phrase "pay your dues" in front of them and watch 50% of them run for the hills pretty quickly. That's kind of not the way people think anymore. If they're talented, they don't want to wait if they're talented and if they work hard, right? So Pablo, let me come to you. You're 100% on the people side of it, right, basically. And so what do you see as far as that is happening right now? What is that difference, and how is it manifesting itself?
I mean, what I've been seeing now during the pandemic, some hotels remain open in some regions. So they were usually running with skeleton team for obvious reasons. The occupancy was very low. Challenge is now when the occupancy starts growing up and the skeleton team remains there. So fair enough, yeah, hotels are meant to do more with less, but we have to be careful. I mean, how little is that team? Because what many hotels are doing is running a very low team, and that means increased number of complaints, because you're trying to keep up the ADR, the rate, but the service is not there because you don't have enough staff. So how do they compensate that to avoid the reviews from customers going down? Give you free upgrades, for example. So okay, give you free upgrades, so you don't complain because you already got an upgrade. Still, it doesn't compensate the lack of service. So I think there's a challenge there now between the level of service you want to provide, the amount of staff you can afford. We have to be honest as well. Occupancy is still not very high, but also the people you can find, because a lot of people have left the industry, and now some hotels, even though if they want to hire, they can't find the talent. And that's going to be a challenge the next few months.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that operate in the United States, and in a lot of locations, based on what they're customarily pay for those positions, the enhanced unemployment benefits make it very difficult to entice people back to work. Who would want to work 40 hours a week for 10% more money? It kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense, really. And so they're having problems just getting people into the positions. And then really kind of more along your lines, right? The right people, right? The well-trained people that can really do the job well. They don't just show up ready, right? They take some time to prepare them. So anyway, Claire, I don't know if you had any other comment on this topic before we move on, but I think it's interesting. We didn't really talk about robots and automation. That's not a word. Automation and all that. But where do you guys see that figuring in? Do you think does that immediately come in, or how does that work out?
I think it does. From our perspective, we've invested quite a bit over the last 12 months. We've been closed for the vast majority of it. We just reopened on Monday, so it's all new again. But we invested in tech to enable express mobile check-in, check-out, not only because we don't need the team to be there to facilitate that check-in, but also the customers want it now. They don't want to be sitting queues and all of that sort of stuff, waiting to check in, waiting to check out. They can do that from the palm of their hand. And that's what people want now. They want everything here. They want it now. So we did that. So that was really good. We invested in our booking engine. So we need less people manually putting stuff in, reservations, taking phone calls, that sort of stuff. All kinds of different things, even down to small things like robotic hoovers, vacuum cleaners for public areas and things to take that staff away. So it's moving really, really fast. I work in an independent hotel, which is notoriously slow at the uptake of tech and things. But I think it's going that way. Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned slow. Our industry in general is slow on the uptake, right? I always wondered if you've ever looked underneath a hotel bed. You kind of immediately wonder why they don't use a Roomba, right? Because they can vacuum under there and doesn't care. Forget the labor savings. It's a short enough vacuuming thing to clean a place we can't clean otherwise. And yet you never really see them in hotels. So be interested to see what the uptake is. And Julian, how about you? Rosewood is a high touch company, right? We all associate Rosewood with a lot of service, a lot of luxury. What are the implications in that segment technology wise? Are they the same or would you say they're different?
No, yeah, well, we're trying to have like more technology in the back end to make sure that people working and the minds of people are helping with through those technology, which is important. So we've been working for the last months, and we started an implementation for Paris, for instance, for gathering all the info prior check-in, check-out as well, to make it smoother. And to enable, the people on property to spend more time with the guests rather than, spending time with all the admin. But it's always a tricky thing because, especially over those times and COVID, people want to invest, but it costs money. So we don't want to spend money. So to me, it's a short-term investment for mid or long-term results. So even though, it's a difficult time, but we have to think long term, 5 years, 6, 7 years, and we definitely need something in the back end to help people to spend more time with guests, because that's the key at the end of the day. We're doing hospitality.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, right? Right now, there's not a lot of cash running around in the business, and so you mentioned that you make that statement of investing for the future when that amount is lean, and some of that technology has a big upfront investment in some cases that even in the good times, because of the way we treat the business, we sometimes are a little slower to pick that up. And let me just ask you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I can add something, if you don't mind. The question always also, lots of companies are working with too many tools to me. Because it's fine, we want to automate, but at the end of the day, you have 2, 3, 4 systems, which are all of them doing more or less the same thing, and you're spending more time, to take care of those systems, to refresh the systems, to you extract one report on system 1, you extract another report on system 2, and you're spending too much time on system at the end of the day. So yes, we have to use system, we have to automate, but be careful, try to find a system which can gather, the different tools you expecting, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned the same thing. You mentioned that some of the automation. I spoke recently with Kelly McGuire, who some of you might know. She's a contributor also to the panel, and always fun online, in case you're wondering. But her company has done a lot of stuff really where they're using technology to wrap old systems so that things can just talk to each other, which to me is a gigantic labor savings. It doesn't necessarily mean revolutionizing your business, but if you can keep people from, it's a real tragedy when you look at a computer screen and type into another computer. That's just to me the saddest transaction on the planet at this point. And so you mentioned automating some of that stuff, which is not guest facing, but does create that time, right, to take better care of the guest and to allow our people to think and that sort of thing. Before we move on, just Pablo, I want to ask you a question. What about the investment in training? You're a training company. Right now, time is lean. We're talking about investing in tech, but investing in people also is improving them. How does that, if I was a development person in your company, what would they say about now versus a year ago?
I mean, for some hotels it's challenging, but they have to see it either from the management or ownership, and sometimes the owners are the one deciding, right? They have to see it as an investment. So not spending money on the team, but investing on them. In trainings like ours, for example, it's very clear the return on investment because you're talking about upselling. But in general, any type of training you do on your team is going to revert on better service on the customers and also better atmosphere within the team. So if you manage to get that mindset on the management and the owners that it is an investment and it's not spending money in the team, they'll go ahead. Yeah. So I mean, we have more and more hotels obviously now reopening or with increased occupancy that are really going into investing in their teams to provide a better service. Yeah.
Certainly there's just like there's revenge travel or pent-up demand for travel, there's definitely not been a tremendous amount of teaching going on the last 12 months. So I would imagine there's probably some pretty pent-up demand for that as well. Exactly. So let's very, very related topic, because we're still obviously on the topic of productivity, but let's slide, Enzo, if you don't mind, let's slide to that next slide. And let's talk about Diego's opinion, which was interesting, right? One of the ones that surfaced was one from one of the people involved in the program. And Julian, it was you that was kind of drawn to this one, talking a little bit more about that same productivity stuff, but that whole concept of smarter, not harder and everything. So I was wondering if you just kind of reflect on what you saw in the post for us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, working hard is good, but working smart is even better, I believe. And there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. So, and that's typical French, working long hours, long days. And I'm French, so I can say so. Working long days, it's better than, working 5 hours, but being more productive. It's just in the mindset, basically. And that's something within the culture which needs to change. So that's not even in France, that's in some other country as well. So before, trying to find some solutions, we have to start, changing the culture as well. Because if you, and a lot of managers and even general managers, saying, okay, yeah, trying to be productive. If you finish earlier, you can leave the office, no problem. But when you're leaving the office and you take a look at his clock, there is an issue. You're feeling bad. So that's why we need, at the end of the day, before talking all these techniques, tools and systems, there are some basic things which can help us working smarter and not harder. The power of mindset. First of all, and shifting to a positive mindset, will lead you to accomplishing more in less time. And just to give you a quick example, negative thinking triggers like, work emails. And I just read a studies last week saying that in average, a professional is checking his email every 37 minutes every day, which is too much. And that's has a direct impact in your productivity. So culture change, I said so. Also another one, another tips, it's achieve phone-life balance. The fear of missing something on your phone, checking your emails, the social network, and lots of staff, lots of employees, whether it's front or back, they have their phone with them during the shift. And that's an issue on productivity as well. That's basic, but that's the real life at the end of the day. What else as well? Organizing your shift, your daily tasks, and usually, you're trying to do everything at the same time, checking emails, answering the phone, working on the project. But at the end of the day, this multitasking reduced productivity by 40% as per study I read in the US. So, which is enormous. So that's something key which we need to look at.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Claire, let me ask you. I think you made a great point, Julie. We talk about work-life balance, but then when we try to leave before the boss, like he does that real subtle thing, he looks at his watch. I've worked at even in the last 5 years, or the last 10 years, at companies with cultures that. We talked about work-life balance a little bit, but typically nobody left until the boss left, and you're kind of watching and you're going, okay, So Claire, let me ask you first from a practical perspective, and then Pablo, you have a more you see a lot of environments, so you see the more macro. Do you think that's really something that's changing? I mean, notification fatigue is something that I learned about during COVID, but it's real, right? It just, oh my goodness, like it's just so much all the time. You can't leave it alone. So what's your experience in the practical sense, Claire?
I think for us over the last year, we've realized that actually you don't need to be at work 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and you need to have that work-life balance, right? And we've seen more productivity from our teams by spending more time at home and less time in the office. Everybody's been working from home, and to switch off, it's important.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting, right? But that whole idea, to me, I loved working from home before I became an educator. I ran remote teams for 15 years, and I really loved the ability to work really hard on a Thursday and take Friday afternoon off. And because I was being measured by what I produced, not by my presence, as long as I got everything done I was supposed to, nobody really cared. Whereas I think when we're keeping track of people, then sometimes we've got them in a time period when they're not really productive, and we still are having them be there when we could, let them go play golf in the afternoon and just work hard the next day to make up for the time. It's nice. I think it's nice to have that level of flexibility. That autonomy feels good. So now, Pablo, let me come to you kind of for the macro perspective. You're in a lot of different businesses. Is it a movement? Is it company by company? Like, what's going on with that stuff in terms of quality of life and everything?
I think in more than companies, it's region by region. So it depends on what you're talking about. So if we look at China, for example, they use WeChat for everything. So there is a very thin line, but there is no line really between personal life, professional life, because they use that network for everything. So in that sense, it's very challenging. If we look into Europe, for example, and using different social media or social networks to work, I think there was a law in France that you cannot reach people outside of working hours, for example, by a government. So there's a clear law making the line in there. To be more proactive, obviously, as the other colleagues are saying, you cannot be working 24 hours focusing on something. We train usually line staff mainly, and for them it's more challenging because they work on shift 24 hours, 24/7 every day of the year. But I think it relies more on the empowerment, empowering the team members, not micromanaging them. And if they know they've done what they're meant to do, then it's fine. And then also from the management point of view, when it comes to hours worked and the amount of workload, it's about balancing the shifts. Sometimes you see teams like you have too many people thinking of reception, for example, too many people at the desk, and there are no check-ins, no check-outs. Like, who did this shift? Why having so many people in here? What's the point? And the opposite, very busy day, nobody really checked the pickup, and you have one person in the massive queue, which again affects the customer satisfaction, the level of service you are providing. So empowering the teams and trying to divide that line between personal and professional life, I think, are key here.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. There were a lot of comments about training and a lot of comments about taking care of people. And I think that there's a really good statement to be made for we're all looking to staff up, and who's going to get the good ones, right? The ones with the reputation of taking care of their people, creating a good work environment. They're not going to be in a constant retraining kind of a mode, and those are better hotels. And the more we can understand data and distribution, the more we recognize that there is a revenue connection between the TripAdvisor comments and it's not just some esoteric thing that's hanging out there, because when we see hotels improve them, we see their market share improve at the same time. So it only makes sense that, if we can create a better environment that the people that are taking care of our own customers like being there, it's only going to be that much better. Julian, I want to ask you just a quick follow-up question. Then I want to touch on another piece of that opinion. You mentioned people having their own devices, but one of the things I've seen is a tremendous push towards personal devices being involved in productivity, like maintenance request things and housekeeping systems and all that kind of stuff. How do we tell them to take their phone upstairs because we want them to punch in their ready rooms, but we don't want them to respond to their kids' texts at the same time? Yeah,
basically that's another phone that I'm using currently. Basically, otherwise, it's impossible. But on another side, we have some employees and some services that who are reassured by having their own phone. Especially over the weekend where there is no manager, so they are having their personal phone, especially for instance in reservation, but in other services as well. You have no manager, you need a quick answer, and that's reassured them, even though that's if that's done, on their personal mobile phone, they know that they can get a quick answer even though if that's late in the evening, during the night, or so it's you have some pros, but you have also some cons, as always.
I mean, there's a balance, right? A lot of us in the hotel business are a little bit controlling. It's part of the reason we got there. You get to run stuff early, right? So we get to be in charge. And so, but so then you tell me I want to connect. So I'm the GM. I typically work Monday through Friday. I leave my email alone. Then I come in on Monday morning and my quality of life is destroyed because someone decided to fix something on their own instead of getting some feedback on it. So there's a real sensitivity right in that balance and all of that stuff. How do you help people understand what things maybe they should still bother me? My quality of life is going to be more ruined by the fact that you let that sprinkler run for 48 hours in the hotel than that you called me on Saturday. So interesting thing. I'm going to stay with you, Julie, and ask you a second. You mentioned, and we actually kind of pointed out elimination. And there was a whole talk about kind of, has COVID taught us to do more with less? And so I was wondering, we could reflect on that a little bit, like some of the process we just couldn't do that are gone and what happened to them.
But that's something we've been always trying to do, eliminate, the unuseful tasks. But now we have to react because not only because of the layoffs, but also because people are leaving the industry. And I listened to the CEO of Accor, who is expecting 25% of his employees not coming back in 2021 after COVID. And that's because they realized that there's a weekend on Saturday and Sunday, and that's why we're starting thinking how we can eliminate tasks, but we have to react and to balance, and to understand what kind of people you're left in the office and within the team. So I think that systems can help, definitely. You can automate some tasks, especially, for instance, revenue manager, the pickup in the morning, etc. You need also to teach people, you managers, you MDs, your CEOs, you've been used to receive some kind of templates. Now it's going to be automated, and it's going to be another template, another format, and sometimes difficult. But you just need to give them argumentation and some specification. Okay, this task takes me 30 minutes every morning. Every morning. If I'm using the system, it takes me like 30 seconds, and I can do something else. I can manage my team. I can focus on guests, and that's to eliminate tasks, you have to argument and to explain things to other people, to make them understand the importance of eliminating.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times as a revenue leader moving from one company to another, someone explains kind of here's kind of how the job was being done, and you realize that there was something that was a couple hours a week that was basically turning something from landscape to portrait because someone liked that format better. And right after COVID, I got a lot of calls from old associates of mine, and they were asking me, okay, I've got my enterprise ID. Now, how do I find that thing, right? Because in so many cases, the people that were pushing that information around when we were fat and had all of this extra labor weren't there anymore, and they had to go find the information themselves. And in some cases, I think good riddance that they figured out how to get it themselves. They get it quicker, and it doesn't take labor to get them the information. So you make a really great point.
And last thing, Scott, we have also to focus on revenue generating. Because eliminating tasks is good, but in order to focus on tasks which are revenue focused, and on some studies, especially in the US, 50% of the time are spent for revenue manager on tasks which are not generating revenue. So it's fine, let's eliminate tasks, but let's also focus on tasks which are generating revenue.
So let me just ask all you guys: do you think that hotels were smart when they had to become lean? In other words, do you think that if you were looking back at it just as a general statement, do you think that we survived COVID well? Let's talk about rebuilding it next. But do you think that it was skinny down in a smart way? Anyone? I don't. Whoever. Someone must have an opinion.
I mean, I think there's more and more offer. The thing is, historically, software was very expensive for many hotels. So usually only large companies or very high-end hotels could afford it. Now with more and more SaaS service, the more hotels who can afford it, even a small property, even hostels can afford a cheap monthly payment PMS or RMS system that they can run their property. So in that sense, I see two types of hotels: the ones who've been eager to develop and to digitalize during the pandemic, and they're getting out of it faster, and the ones who just put the curtain down and say, okay, let's wait until everything is over and then put it up again and let's reopen. They're miles behind the ones who've been investing. So there's going to be a challenge for them.
Yeah, I heard somebody say that there'll be people that learn from their rate shopping tool that there's a recovery, and people that learn from their competitors' parking lots that there's a recovery. So yeah, it's not democratic, right? It's definitely the ones that work better will feel it sooner, and that's money you'll always have, right? That's not money that if you're the one with the least market share next year, you don't recoup it the following year. So so that's a really great point to move forward on. Pablo, I want to stay with you now. And I just have to move something out of the way here. Kind of the last opinion that we were going to spend some time on was from Raul Moranta, a good friend of mine, actually, Chief Revenue Officer for Remington. And so tell us what you saw in that post. I think that was an interesting one as well.
Yeah, so there were two main points in there. One was about the evaluation of productivity, how and if productivity is properly measured, and another one was engagement from team members in the hotel. So touching on the first point on productivity, I mean, we've been mentioning already. So you might have good productivity scores if you're only measuring, for example, revenue generated by the staff members. But then if the staff level is too low and that is affecting your reputation, maybe that's not the right measure in terms of productivity. So I will question if hotels are really properly measuring productivity. So when it comes, for example, you think housekeeping, traditional is very simple. You have a number of rooms, you have a number of staff members, this amount of rooms per maid. Okay, that's simple. That's the way you measure productivity. But what about, or you take waiters, for example, you take the number of tables that you have, this amount of tables per waiter, there you go, there's your ratio. What about reception, for example? How you measure reception productivity? Are many hotels saying, okay, I have this number of check-ins, this number of check-outs, and let's see how many check-ins and check-outs each team member is doing every day? But some hotels are doing it, but many are not. So, I mean, what is the productivity of each team member or the reception? Come to bartenders, for example, because the waiter is easy. You can't count the number of chairs in the tables. What about the bartender? Are you measuring the revenue generated per bartender per work hour, for example? Or you just put 3 bartenders because it's Saturday evening? So these are the things that are there. It's not difficult to measure it, but you really need a proper reference. You need a benchmark. And if you do it wrong, then the entire policy is probably misfired. So that was one.
I mean, you can potentially just demotivate your entire organization, right? Because you're making stuff that's not important the most important thing. I mean, that's a real problem. I love what you said about front desk productivity. I'd love to be able to track it at the front desk clerk. Anyone who's worked the front desk, you're either that person who always manages to go back in the back first while everyone else is still engaged, or you're the person that hates that person that goes back in the back first. So it'd be amazing to have empirical data that we could say, how does she always end up checking in 20% fewer people than the rest of us? Because she's an artist at getting away, right? So, anyways, that would be amazing. That kind of information, to those sorts of metrics to inform your business. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's something that we do already. So that particular point, for example, in reception, so we can measure from our report how many check-ins each person does, and based on those shifts and the number of check-ins, how many upsells they do, for example. So then to have revisions with them, in terms of the performance. So how come you have the same shifts, the same number of hours, this person was doing 3 times more check-ins than you? Mm-hmm. And in that time, they managed to do this number of upsells or this number of enrollments, for example. And you can really measure, compare apples to apples in that sense. So that was one of the main points from Rahul's article. And then the other one, it was about team engagement and motivation. So we touched base already on how challenging it's going to be now to find staff. And I'm really a great advocate of incentivizing people. And sometimes people say, well, we don't have cash, but incentive is not only about cash. Everybody thinks about like the sales teams, or you get a commission if you sell something. Incentive can be also non-monetary. So for line staff, changing shifts, for example, letting them choose their day off, that can be an incentive for people and doesn't cost you anything from the revenue point of view. And incentive really improves productivity. You improve the motivation of the team member, the engagement is there, which is going to be a challenge. You were saying it yourself. Many people are in the position to choose where they're going to be willing to work, and they're going to choose the hotels in this case that are looking after their teams. So, and you have to think, okay, how am I going to retribute these people? If the salary is what it is, because I cannot increase it, how else can I keep them engaged and motivate them? And there are endless ways of incentivizing your team. It doesn't necessarily cost money. I was doing some research. There was this McKinsey survey that shows that the non-financial incentives, such as praise and commendation from immediate manager, attention from leaders, and opportunities to lead projects, they have much more impact on team than financial incentives, for example. But statistically, they are used less than monetary incentives.
Well, because who are they conceived by? They're conceived by people who have different motivations in their careers that are largely financially driven. And that's why they're the ones conceiving them, not the ones living with them in some cases, right? Where I think those are people that may just simply be making decisions that are more quality of life driven. And so they're motivated by other things. What are some of those things, Pablo? I'm going to go around a little bit and ask you about what are some of those non-monetary things? You mentioned some really great ones. Developing your own schedule, and that kind of, and so thing. But what are some of those things that you're finding that are the most successful, the greatest?
There are countries, for example, they only have 1 day off per week. And the line staff, so you can give them, whoever it's based on productivity, on sales, on enrollments, whatever what you're measuring for the team, an extra day off a week, for example, or giving the birthday off every year, no? Regardless of if it's busy, it's your birthday, you're entitled to have your day off. Some companies, that will cost money, but talking about retirement plans, career development, many hotels still don't really have a clear development plan for the team, so it can be frustrating for especially younger generations. They are really eager to, and they want to progress very fast. So unless there is a clear career path for them, it can be frustrating and they can leave. So have it clear from the beginning for them. And medical insurance for some countries, some companies also still, it will cost money, but it's not directly given to that agent or that staff member, but it's a different way to incentivize.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned like a new type of worker. I think it's super important for those of us that have gray hair like me to remember that just because people have different motivations, they're not motivatable, right? And these are, for the most part, super ambitious people. And I found one of the best retention tools was hope. It's exactly as you say. It's about development, about the opportunity for the future, not the illusion of hope. That doesn't work. That gets seen through super fast, but actually real hope, right? And upside in those kind of things. I think, it really is very motivating. And we fall into a trap of kind of sort of that stereotypical millennial label sometimes, which you really just need to understand. It's not that they're not motivatable. It's just that they don't necessarily respond to the stuff that I responded to when I was 20. It's a different thing. Claire, let me ask you, and from the single property perspective, what are you finding is the most important stuff as you start to ramp back up, as you get back into that mode of, expecting business to be better?
From a staffing point of view?
Just in general. What do you find? Obviously you're around staff now. They're actually doing their jobs again for the first time in a while. What's, have they come back different? Let me ask you a little bit differently.
We have seen that people have come back differently in the UK. I'm not sure about other places, but we have a thing called furlough. So people were still earning money even when the businesses were closed. So there's kind of been a bit of a shift in, some people haven't worked for 15 months. Some people have been dropping in and out. So it's quite difficult to gauge where everybody's at, which level they're at. If they've had if they've been out of the business 15 months, they need some training and they need a little bit of confidence boost and a little bit of understanding about where we're at, what we've been through for the last 15 months, trying to keep the business afloat and bringing it along on this journey that we've been on. So I think it's about treating each individual as individuals and understanding what their needs are. We are struggling to recruit as a lot of places are, because there is a lack of available resource, where you would have thought it would be totally the opposite. There'd be loads of resource available because so many people got laid off. But it's actually quite different. So it's about understanding what the individual needs, and those individual needs are very different depending on who you're talking to. So it's about understanding that and about taking a personal note of your team and what their requirements are, I think.
Cool. Julian, actually, before we move on from this one, I want to shift to you and ask you a little bit more specific about revenue and commercial disciplines. And that has to do with incentive compensation. We've kind of talked about incentive compensation and talked about it not monetary, but let's face it, most commercial people are pretty motivated by the bonus component of their pay. And yet we've got sometimes we end up with some KPIs that are at odds. Certainly when we look at the way we measure operations, I'm sure that there's been a lot of profitability percentage focus now in terms of managing expenses. That's not very conducive to revenue growing back at a slow average rate. That's going to make us fight about our bonuses. Mm-hmm. So how are you guys dealing with that in terms of being able to align exec comp and leaders comp and that sort of thing?
It's not an easy one because we've been discussing a while on the different regions, and on some it's up to the property. And in some properties, we're not going to make the budget, whatever the budget is. So nothing at all for the year to come. You can be glad to keep your job already, which is that's the reality. We have to, of course, we have to communicate, quite smartly, but you can keep your job. It's not easy. So this time is gonna be tough, but next year, we'll set up new bonuses, new bonuses, and moving forward. On another side, in some properties, we set up bonuses because we think and we believe that even though we're not gonna achieve whatever the budget is, we have an objective, whether it's the forecast, whether it's the budget. And you have to motivate and give a vision and objective to people. So even if it's and that's always the question, I guess, Pablo, you're facing on a daily basis, but you're paid for what you're doing, So you have a salary. So what do you have to get a bonus? And that's always the question, But you're paid. An employee is paid to do the basics, and to achieve what's normality. But if you want to push them to do better, you have to incentivize. And I strongly believe that even during some difficult times, we have to give people a vision, an objective, and to incentivize to make them generate more revenue at the end of the day.
So, Pablo, let me just ask you to follow up on that. That's basically kind of the crux of the success of your company, in effect, right? Is being able to demonstrate that return on investment that is not so direct, as adding another restaurant it brings revenue, right? It has a chain in order to connect it. What are the tools you use to overcome that?
First thing is we make sure that the hotel is going to pay an incentive. In this case, a monetary incentive to the team. A part of recognition, a monthly employee of the month, and things like that, right? But very clear guidelines when it comes to incentive. It needs to be permanent. So you cannot really play with incentive. This month is going to be on, next month is going to be off. That's really demotivated for teams. That's one, for example. Another one, it needs to be clearly linked to a target. You cannot say, okay, the target is $50,000, whatever, dollars, and then halfway through the month, because things are going fine, let's increase it to 75. Again, very demotivated for teams. Then you have to set, is there going to be a limit or not? Is it going to be capped or is it going to be unlimited, for example? It has to be also very clear for the teams. And then if it's going to be taxable or not, there's going to be topped out by the company, like little details depending on the countries whether you're working with. So as long as those guidelines are clear and they're passed to the teams, that everyone is on the same page, that is a great starting point. And after the first month, they start seeing the results of their efforts, both receptionists or spa team members, depending on training, and you see the middle management, the senior management seeing the numbers and the returns. Like, okay, great, let's keep pushing because it's giving us some results. But it needs to be very consistent and as simple as possible. I've seen ultra complicated incentive programs. You mix the results with the guest reviews, with the audits from the sustainability guy. It's like, how? Why? Nobody understands this. So it should be as simple as possible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I worked at a hotel one time with an amazing sales staff, amazing direct sales staff. I was a sales manager at the time, had an amazing year, and we got a 5% growth budget, and we all left because we all knew there was no way we were going to duplicate the year before. And someone should have been really happy that we had last year, not penalized us this year. So there was no, and so really every single good salesperson on that team by the end of the first quarter could see the horizon. There wasn't going to be the great big goose at the end of the year that there was before. And if we had simply stayed flat to last year, everyone should have earned heroic bonuses. But the way it was set up, flat to last year was going to earn us nothing. So everyone left. It was an immediate demotivator. As soon as people started to do the math, you could see them, kind of become dissatisfied. And by the end of the first quarter, it was that great team had completely dissolved because it just wasn't really conceived of very well. And perhaps that needs to be the budget for the owner or things like that. But then someone should have a discussion with people that are impacted. They should be able to see that and roll forward and see the impact of it. So yeah, that's a really great point. Claire, any comments on the topic before we kind of move on? I'm going to run around and get everyone's last word of wisdom in a second, but I just want to give you a chance to chime in.
I think, when we talk about incentives, I think it has to be personalized and relevant to the person that it's aimed at, basically, to keep them motivated. And at the end of the day, it is about generating revenue and the guest experience, bettering the guest experience.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, so guys, we've got like 2 minutes. Enzo loves to cut me off. I'm not going to let him do it today. I'm going to finish on time. So let me just kind of go around in the order that we started. So Pablo, I'll start with you. It's kind of on the topic of the day. What's the one gold nugget that we should leave everybody with as we go around?
Have a clear relation between the size of the team that you have, the size of the business that you have, and a clear benchmark when it comes to productivity. So clear targets and be realistic.
Cool. And Claire, same question for you. Golden nugget of wisdom that you want to share before we wrap it up.
I think we need to be open-minded that we need to invest now for the future.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, big time. And Julian, same thing.
Yeah, I would say golden triangle. Cut cost, but also generate revenue and customer experience.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add, I would say listen to your folks. Right, a chef who cooks all day long and doesn't listen to the waitress once in a while with comments about the people who are eating the food kind of misses it. So listen to people, what motivates them. Right, you might be surprised. It might, as you mentioned, Pablo. I think many of us, we are programmed to believe that it's money because that's what drove us to the positions we're in. And I think if we think a little bit differently, it's probably quality of life. Honestly, it's probably other things when you really think about it. So, yeah, very cool. Well, Enzo, I think I finished right on time today, so you should be proud of me. Man, I'd love for you guys to join us and join the conversation. So
yeah, you did great. You did great, guys. Actually, you finished earlier, so we still have a couple more minutes before we start the vendor track sessions. We take this couple of minutes. I want to pass the word to my colleague Chris again, just to explain again what we did, guys. What we have created, an amazing ebook. Come on, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. What an interesting discussion. The topic on productivity, it's so relevant, it's so important. One of my personal favorites. So thanks everyone for tuning in and for watching the great discussion. Quick reminder, we are still in the draw for the revenue management, the dictionary, winner of the consulting session with Diego, Federica, and myself. So go on hospitalitynet.org/TRM dictionary and sign up for the free copy of your dictionary right now before the end of this show, and you will be part of the draw. You can, of course, get the dictionary also afterwards, but you will only be able to be a part of the draw if you sign up right now. At the end of this show, after the technology track and after the masterclass, we're going to announce the winner. So maybe it's you.
Great. So we got 1 more minute. Scott, what was your impression today? What was the conversation? This productivity is becoming very hot topics, man.
I think what I was actually moved by the most, honestly, I think it was a great panel. It was a great discussion. I thought it was really fascinating that there's really, really strong feelings from the comments too when you read the comments. And so a lot of people are really tuned into what is the health of the business when we get back to it? And if you think about there are hotels with brands that would never be able to be that brand under normal circumstances because they've cut their service levels way down. Eventually, that's all going to grow back to what it was before, right? A full service not going to embarrass any one brand, but it's going to have restaurants again. It's not, it's going to have all those services. And I think that it's really encouraging to watch people in the industry like really kind of tune into that and be very aware of people already again, because I think the tendency might have been to kind of disregard the fact that that's really, really important part of our business, because there weren't very many of them around for a while. So that was the part I took away the most. I think it's really cool to see that we're focused back on folks, and that there's already some optimism and health for the business. That's my favorite part.